I was 28 years old, sitting in a sleek glass conference room on the 14th floor of a downtown office building, wearing my best interview suit that I'd bought specifically for this moment. The suit was navy blue, tailored as much as a size 22 body allows, and I'd paired it with sensible black heels that made my feet ache but made me feel professional. Across from me sat 3 people. Mark, the hiring manager with salt and pepper hair and a Rolex that caught the light every time he gestured. Jennifer, the HR representative who smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. And Tom, a senior analyst who kept glancing at his phone like he had somewhere better to be. I'd prepared for 2 weeks for this interview. I'd researched the company, memorized their quarterly reports, practiced answers to behavioral questions in front of my bathroom mirror until my roommate told me to stop because I was keeping her awake. This was my dream job. Marketing coordinator at Vanguard Solutions, a mid-sized consulting firm that worked with Fortune 500 companies. Good salary, better benefits, room for growth. Everything I needed at that point in my career. The interview started well. My answers about campaign strategy and market analysis drew from examples at a small nonprofit where I'd increased donor engagement by 37% in 1 year. Mark nodded at my responses. Jennifer scribbled notes furiously. Tom finally looked up from his phone, momentarily engaged. Then Mark leaned back in his chair, folded his hands across his stomach, and asked something completely unexpected. This role requires a lot of client-facing work. Travel, presentations, networking events. Our clients expect a certain level of professionalism and representation. Do you feel you're able to represent our brand effectively? My stomach dropped before I even answered. I said, absolutely. In my previous role, I managed client relationships and presented at conferences. I'm comfortable with public speaking and professional environments. He nodded slowly, exchanged a glance with Jennifer, then turned back to me. Right. But this is a different caliber of client. Fortune 500 executives, high-stakes environments, image matters. The room temperature seemed to plummet. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably. Tom returned his attention to his phone. My mouth went dry. I understand. I'm confident in my ability to represent your company professionally, I managed. Mark smiled, but it wasn't warm. We'll be in touch. Walking out of that building, I already knew the rejection was coming. The bus ride home felt longer than usual. I stood at my apartment door for 5 minutes before unlocking it, dreading the moment I'd have to tell my roommate the interview didn't go well. That evening, I called my mom and described the conversation. She said, "You don't know that's why they didn't hire you. Maybe they found someone more qualified, but we both knew better." He didn't say the word fat. He didn't have to. Image matters. Represent our brand. A certain level of professionalism. The subtext was deafening. 3 days later, the rejection email arrived. Polite, vague, wishing me well in my career. No mention of my weight. None was needed. I spent a week in a fog. Too much food, too much sleep, too much avoidance of mirrors and phone calls and anything requiring engagement with the world. Then something shifted. Not a sudden epiphany, but a quiet decision that I wouldn't let that man in his expensive suit define my future. Anger mixed with stubbornness, creating something closer to determination. One morning I woke up and decided to stop feeling sorry for myself. Not because Mark was right. He wasn't. But because I wanted to prove he was wrong. More importantly, I wanted to prove something to myself. My first stop was a gym 3 blocks from my apartment. Not one of those Instagram-worthy boutique places with juice bars and influencers, but a regular no-frills facility that smelled like sweat and rubber. A trainer named Luis took me on. He didn't comment on my weight or push miracle programs. He simply asked what my goals were. "I want to feel strong," I told him. "I want to feel in control of my body." He nodded. "Then let's start there." We began with basics. Walking on the treadmill, bodyweight squats, learning proper form to avoid injury. The early days were humiliating. I couldn't manage a single push-up, and stairs left me breathless. But Luis never made me feel ashamed. He'd say, "You're not competing with them. You're competing with yesterday's version of yourself." That became my mantra. Every rep I completed was a small victory. Every workout I showed up for was proof that I was taking control. What surprised me most was how physical strength began, translating into professional confidence almost immediately. 2 weeks into my gym routine, I was back at work presenting quarterly reports to the nonprofit's board of directors. Usually, I'd stand in front of that room, feeling small, apologizing for taking up space at the podium. This time felt different. My shoulders were straighter. My voice carried more authority. I wasn't physically transformed yet. I'd lost maybe 5 pounds, but something internal had shifted. The act of showing up for myself at the gym was teaching me to show up for myself everywhere. I made eye contact with the board members. I didn't rush through my presentation. I answered questions with certainty instead of hedging. One board member approached me afterward and said, "You seem more confident lately. It's impressive." I realized then that confidence wasn't about being thin. It was about respecting yourself enough to demand respect from others. Simultaneously, I worked with a nutritionist named Angela, who taught me about balance rather than restriction, portion sizes, macros, how to fuel my body without punishment. She never used words like deprivation or sacrifice. Instead, we talked about nourishment and sustainability. She explained that my body was a tool I needed to maintain, not a problem I needed to punish. This reframing changed everything. Sunday meal prep became routine. Vegetables became something I actually enjoyed. When cravings hit, I satisfied them without guilt. Food stopped being the enemy and became fuel. As my eating patterns stabilized, my energy levels at work improved dramatically. No more afternoon crashes that left me struggling through meetings. No more brain fog that made decision-making difficult. My mind felt clearer. My focus sharpened. Colleagues started asking if I was okay because I seemed different somehow. What they were noticing was the result of taking care of myself, and that care was paying dividends in every area of my life. 3 months into my gym routine, my boss pulled me aside. "I want to talk to you about taking on more responsibility," she said. "I've noticed you're stepping up, asking better questions, showing more initiative. How would you feel about leading our next major donor campaign?" A year earlier, I would have declined. I would have convinced myself I wasn't ready, that someone else was more qualified. But something had changed. The discipline of showing up at the gym every day was teaching me that I could do hard things, that I could push through discomfort and come out stronger on the other side. "I'd love to," I said. That campaign became my project. I spent weeks researching donors, crafting compelling pitches, and building a strategy. My physical transformation was still in early stages. I'd lost maybe 15 pounds at this point, but my professional transformation was accelerating. The confidence I was building in my body was bleeding into every other area of my life. The weight came off gradually over the next 6 months. 5 pounds in month 1, 7 in month 2, 10 in month 3. Not dramatic or fast, but consistent and sustainable. Changes appeared beyond the scale. Stairs no longer left me winded. Grocery bags felt lighter. My back stopped hurting. Sleep improved. My skin cleared. Energy levels stabilized. But the professional changes were equally significant. As my physical energy increased, my work output increased proportionally. I was staying later, taking on bigger projects, volunteering for responsibilities others avoided. My boss noticed. She gave me a raise, then a promotion to senior coordinator, then another raise. She told me I was the best hire she'd ever made. By that point, I was starting to believe her. Around month 8, I hit a milestone. I'd lost 50 pounds and could see real physical changes in the mirror. That same week, I presented the results of the donor campaign I'd led. The numbers were exceptional. We'd exceeded our fundraising goal by 23%. My boss presented these results to the board, crediting my leadership. Sitting in that room, watching people nod and take notes about work I'd done, I felt something I'd never felt before. Pride in myself. Not the fragile, temporary pride that comes from external validation, but deep-rooted pride in my own capabilities. I'd set a goal, both physical and professional, and I'd achieved it. That feeling became addictive. I wanted more of it, but the journey wasn't linear. Around month 10, I hit a plateau. The weight loss stalled. I stopped seeing changes in the mirror. Simultaneously, work became more demanding. My expanded responsibilities meant longer hours. Some days I was too tired to go to the gym. Some weeks I fell back into old eating patterns. My energy dipped. My confidence wavered. I remember one particularly bad day when I looked in the mirror and felt the old shame creeping back. That same day, I made a mistake in a presentation to a client. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to shake me. I went home and almost quit everything. The gym, the healthy eating, the whole thing. Then Luis texted me, "Haven't seen you in a week. Everything okay?" That simple check-in made me realize something crucial. The people around me had noticed my transformation. They were invested in my success. I wasn't doing this alone. I went back to the gym the next morning. Luis adjusted my routine. Angela adjusted my nutrition plan. We talked about plateaus being normal, about how bodies adapt, about how pushing through requires patience. My boss, noticing my decreased energy, suggested I take a day off. "You've been pushing hard," she said. "Rest is part of the process." That permission to rest, to take care of myself without guilt, was transformative. I realized that self-care wasn't selfish. It was necessary. It was maintenance. Just like maintaining my body required consistency, maintaining my career required boundaries and balance. Month 12 brought a breakthrough. The scale started moving again. More importantly, I'd learned something crucial about myself. I could persevere through difficulty. I could plateau and not quit. I could make mistakes and recover. These weren't just physical lessons. They were professional lessons. When a campaign didn't perform as expected, I didn't panic. I analyzed what went wrong and adjusted. When a presentation didn't land perfectly, I learned from it and did better next time. The discipline I was building in the gym was building resilience everywhere. By month 18, I'd lost 120 pounds, from a size 22 to a size 12. Closets worth of clothes no longer fit, so I donated them and bought replacements. Running, which I'd always claimed to hate but really just feared, became part of my routine. A 5K happened, then a 10K. Winning didn't matter. Finishing did. My body transformed from something I resented into something I respected. It carried me. It lifted heavy things. It got stronger every week. Simultaneously, my professional trajectory had accelerated significantly. I'd been promoted twice more. I was now managing a small team. I was presenting to the board quarterly. I was being consulted on strategic decisions. My boss had started grooming me for director-level roles. People sought out my opinion. They valued my input. What fascinated me was the correlation between physical and professional confidence. As I became more comfortable in my body, I became more comfortable in boardrooms. As I learned to set boundaries with my fitness routine, saying no to things that didn't serve my goals, I learned to set boundaries at work. As I celebrated small physical victories, I celebrated professional wins with the same enthusiasm. The skills were transferable. The mindset was the same. Show up consistently. Push through discomfort. Learn from failures. Celebrate progress. Repeat. Around the 2-year mark, something unexpected happened. A LinkedIn message arrived from a recruiter at Vanguard Solutions, the same company that had rejected me. She'd seen my profile and thought I'd be perfect for a senior marketing manager role. Strong salary, leadership opportunity, room for growth. She wanted to discuss it. The company name made me pause. At 260 pounds, I'd been deemed not professional enough. Now at 140 pounds, they wanted me. The irony wasn't lost on me, but here's what surprised me. I didn't feel bitter. I felt ready. Not because I was thinner, but because I'd spent 2 years proving to myself that I was capable. I'd built a track record, I'd led teams, I'd increased revenue, I'd delivered results. My weight loss was the catalyst, but my professional growth was the foundation. I wanted to walk back into that building not to prove Mark wrong, but to prove to myself that I belonged there. The recruiter scheduled a phone screen, then a video interview, then an in-person meeting. When I arrived at that glass building, I wore a gray suit in size 10, perfectly tailored. My heels were comfortable and professional. The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt surreal. The conference room might have been the same one as before. 3 people waited for me, not Mark. He'd left the company 6 months prior, but Jennifer was there. She didn't recognize me. That much was obvious. She introduced herself like we'd never met, shaking my hand and saying it was nice to meet me. I didn't correct her. The interview unfolded smoothly. My answers about scaling marketing strategies and managing teams came from real experience. Case studies from my current role demonstrated measurable results. I talked about a campaign I'd led that increased nonprofit donations by 42%. I discussed team dynamics and conflict resolution. I explained my philosophy on professional development. When they asked about high-stakes clients, I answered without hesitation. I've presented to C-suite executives at 3 Fortune 500 companies in the last year. I'm comfortable in high-pressure environments, and I understand the importance of professional representation. Jennifer nodded and wrote something down. At the conclusion, she said, "We're very impressed. We'd like to move forward with a final round." Catherine, the VP of marketing, conducted the final interview. She had sharp eyes and a firmer handshake than most men I'd encountered. Her questions were tough. She challenged my answers, wanting specifics about handling difficult scenarios, building teams, managing conflict. Honesty felt more important than perfection. When she asked about my biggest professional failure, I didn't shy away. I talked about a campaign that underperformed early in my career. I explained what I'd learned. I discussed how I'd applied those lessons to subsequent projects. She listened intently. At the end, she leaned back and said, "I'm going to be honest. With you, we've interviewed 8 candidates for this role. You're the strongest one. I'd like to extend an offer." 2 days later, the formal offer arrived. Senior marketing manager, $20,000 more than my current salary, full benefits, 4 weeks vacation, a team of 3 reports. Reading that email 3 times didn't make it feel more real, but accepting it did. My boss at the nonprofit cried when I gave notice. "They're lucky to have you," she said. "I know," I replied. Starting at Vanguard Solutions felt like stepping into a different world. Onboarding was smooth. My new team was professional and welcoming. Nobody commented on my appearance. Nobody seemed to recognize me. Everything felt new, even though I was technically returning. What struck me immediately was how different I felt in professional spaces now. The first week, I attended a company-wide meeting with about 200 people. 2 years earlier, I would have sat in the back, trying to be invisible. Now, I sat near the front. I made eye contact. I asked a thoughtful question. Afterwards, several people approached me, asking who I was and what team I was on. These weren't people evaluating my appearance. They were evaluating my presence, my competence, my contribution. The physical transformation had opened the door, but the professional transformation was what made me valuable. 3 weeks into the role, Jennifer stopped by my office with paperwork. "How are you settling in?" she asked. "Really well," I answered. She smiled and turned to leave, then hesitated. I said, "Jennifer? Have we met before I started here?" She tilted her head, studying my face. Confusion crossed her features, then recognition, then something resembling embarrassment. "Oh, I didn't realize. You interviewed here about 2 years ago for a marketing coordinator role. You were in the room." Her expression shifted. "You look different." Without hesitation, I said, "I lost 140 pounds. Another pause followed. She shifted her weight, glanced at the door like she wanted to escape. "Congratulations. That's impressive," she managed. "Thank you." "I worked hard," I replied. She excused herself quickly. Work itself proved demanding but fulfilling. Managing campaigns for clients in finance, healthcare, and tech kept me engaged. My team respected my leadership not because of appearance, but because of competence. I'd learned this distinction clearly. People respect capability, not aesthetics. My team didn't care that I was thinner. They cared that I had a strategic vision, that I made good decisions, that I developed them professionally. 6 months into the role, Catherine called me into her office for my performance review. "You've exceeded expectations," she said. "You've brought a level of strategic thinking we haven't had before. I'm impressed." I thanked her and meant it. She continued, "I've also noticed something else. You have a presence in meetings. People listen to you. That's rare. That's valuable." What Catherine was observing was the culmination of 2 years of personal development. My physical transformation had given me confidence. That confidence had manifested as presence. Presence commanded respect. Respect translated to influence. Influence translated to career advancement. The chain was clear now. 9 months later, Catherine got promoted to Chief Marketing Officer. She called me in and offered me her old position. "I'd like you to apply for my role. Marketing Director. You'd manage 5 managers and their teams. Bigger budget, bigger scope, bigger impact." Without hesitation, I said yes. The interview process included external candidates with more experience and fancier credentials. I got the job anyway. Becoming Director of Marketing at Vanguard Solutions happened exactly 1 year after starting as Senior Manager. Exactly 3 years after being rejected for an entry-level coordinator role. Walking past that conference room on my first day felt symbolic. Standing in the doorway, I thought about the person I'd been during that first interview. Desperate, insecure, carrying weight both physical and emotional. Everything that followed, the gym sessions, the meals, the runs, the promotions, had transformed me. It would have been so easy to accept Mark's verdict, to believe I wasn't good enough because I didn't fit his narrow definition of professional. Instead, I'd chosen differently. The weight loss wasn't about proving Mark wrong, though that was a satisfying side effect. It wasn't about fitting into someone else's standards or earning respect through appearance. Losing weight happened because I wanted to feel strong, because I wanted to be healthy, because I wanted to stop living in a body that felt like a prison. The job, the promotions, the success, those came because I was excellent at what I did, not because I was thin, because I worked hard and led well, and showed up every day ready to deliver results. The physical transformation was the catalyst. The professional transformation was the substance. Hard days still happened. Days when I looked in the mirror and saw loose skin. That exercise couldn't fix. Days when the comfort of emotional eating called to me. Days when I felt like an imposter in my new body, like I was wearing someone else's skin. Days when I questioned whether I'd earned my position, or if people were just impressed by my appearance. But those days became increasingly rare. On difficult mornings, I reminded myself of what I'd accomplished. Not just the weight loss, but the life I'd built. The respect I'd earned, the person I'd become. I'd led teams to exceed targets. I'd developed employees who got promoted. I'd created marketing strategies that won industry awards. These accomplishments had nothing to do with my dress size. Running into Jennifer again came about 6 months after my promotion to director. We were both in the break room. She was making coffee while I grabbed water. She hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask you something? Do you think if we'd hired you 3 years ago, would you have been ready for this role?" Honest reflection suggested the answer was no. "Probably not," I said. I was qualified for the coordinator position, but I wasn't ready to be a director. I needed the experience I gained in between. More importantly, I needed to develop the confidence that comes from proving things to yourself. She nodded slowly. "So maybe it worked out the way it was supposed to." I met her eyes. "That doesn't make what happened okay, though. You should have evaluated me on qualifications, not appearance. But yes, I'm grateful for the path I took. It taught me things I wouldn't have learned. Otherwise," she looked down at her coffee. "I know. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. We should have judged you on your qualifications, not your appearance." My response came easily. "You're right. You should have." We stood in silence for a moment. Then she said, "I'm glad you got that chance." "Me too," I agreed. The truth is complicated. Whether I would have gotten this director role if I still weighed 260 pounds remains unknowable. I'd like to believe competence matters more than appearance, that qualifications speak louder than dress size. But I'm not naive. Bias exists. People make judgments based on appearance before we ever open our mouths. Fine to you. Weight loss opened doors that might have stayed closed otherwise, and that's not fair. But here's what I know. I can't control what other people think of me. I can only control what I think of myself, and I refuse to let anyone else's limitations become my ceiling. The physical transformation gave me access. My professional excellence kept me there. Vanguard Solutions remains my employer. 2 more promotions followed my director role. Currently, I serve as Vice President of Marketing Strategy, managing a department of 35 people. Meetings with CEOs and CMOs of recognizable companies are routine. Conferences and speaking panels happen regularly. Representing the company at industry events is part of my job. Doing exactly what Mark said I couldn't do. Doing it exceptionally well. My team respects me. My clients trust me. My boss values me. Not because of how I look, but because of what I deliver. Not because I'm thin, but because I'm competent, strategic, and visionary. Physical fitness remains part of my routine, though not obsessively. Most days include time at the gym, but not every single day. Lifting heavy weights, running longer distances, taking rest days when my body needs them. These activities comprise my routine. Eating food that nourishes my body happens most of the time, with occasional indulgences that bring joy. 3 years of weight maintenance has taught me that consistency matters more than perfection. Some weeks are harder than others, but showing up regularly keeps everything balanced. The same principle applies to my career. Some quarters are more challenging than others. Some projects don't go as planned, but consistent effort, continuous learning, and strategic thinking keep me advancing. The disciplines reinforce each other. That first interview crosses my mind occasionally. The moment Mark leaned back in his chair and decided I wasn't good enough based purely on his prejudice. Anger used to flood through me at that memory. Now I mostly feel grateful. Not because what he did was right, it absolutely wasn't, but because his rejection forced me to make a choice. Letting that rejection destroy me was possible. Accepting his verdict and deciding people like me don't belong in that world was possible, but I didn't choose either path. Instead, I chose to fight. I chose to prove that my worth wasn't determined by my weight. In doing that, I became someone stronger than I ever would have been if he'd simply hired me. I would have coasted. I would have assumed I belonged without earning it. Instead, I had to build everything from the ground up. That foundation is unshakable. If you're reading this and have ever been judged for your weight, your appearance, or anything about you that doesn't fit someone else's narrow definition of acceptable, hear this. They're wrong. Not misguided, not operating with incomplete information. Wrong. Your size doesn't determine your competence. Your appearance doesn't dictate your value. Anyone who can't see past the surface to recognize your talent, your effort, and your potential is someone whose opinion doesn't matter. The hurt is real. The rejection stings. Believing their verdict becomes tempting. But don't. Because they're wrong, and you deserve better. You deserve a workplace that values your contributions. You deserve a life where you feel strong, healthy, and capable. You deserve to take up space without apologizing. If you want to change your body, to lose weight, gain muscle, or feel better in your skin, that's your choice. Not because someone else demanded it, not because society has standards you must meet, but because you want it, for yourself, on your terms. The physical transformation can open doors, but only you can walk through them and build something meaningful on the other side. Only you can develop the skills, the knowledge, the presence that makes you indispensable. Only you can create the professional legacy that defines your career. And if you're happy in your body exactly as it is, that's equally valid. You don't owe anyone transformation. You don't owe anyone before and after photos. You owe yourself the chance to live fully, to pursue your goals, to demand the respect you've earned. You owe yourself the opportunity to develop professionally, to lead effectively, to contribute meaningfully. All of it, regardless of your appearance. The world will try to reduce you to your body. Refuse that reduction. You are so much more than your appearance. You are your competence. You are your character. You are your contributions. You are your vision. Build from there. I'm not special. I'm not uniquely disciplined or uncommonly strong. I'm simply someone who got tired of being counted out and decided to count myself in. Someone who learned that the only opinion of me that truly matters is my own. Someone who understood that physical transformation was just the beginning. The real work was professional transformation. The real victory was building a career that nobody could diminish based on appearance alone. The real triumph was becoming so competent, so valuable, so essential that my presence commanded respect regardless of my dress size. If I can do it, you can too. Not because you have to, but because you can, and that makes all the difference.